Merry Christmas to one and all, and welcome to the Tilehurst End of 2020 special. I bet those words sounded good. End of 2020. It's finally just about dawning on us and finally just about coming round to the end of the calendar year. And as is customary for the Reading FC podcast by fans for fans, we are going to deliver our recap of the last 12 months and some awards to go along with it. And to do that, I am delighted. Well, firstly, I'm your host, Marc Mayo. If you are new to this podcast, I'm delighted to welcome myself onto it. But if you're tuning in as well, we have three of the finest Reading minds to talk us all through it as well. The Tilehurst End editor, Simeon Pickup, joins us. How's it going, mate?
I'm good, thanks. Strange times, but good to have some football to talk about to take your mind off it.
Absolutely. And Olly Allen as well. How is it going?
I'm very good, thank you, Mark. Bit sad we can't be in a pub recording this year. I got a notification on my time hop this morning that 2 years ago today we were in the Hope Tap in Reading for our 2018 Christmas special. But such is the modern times, so we're recording over Zoom.
Yeah, I can't promise that this podcast will be completely devoid of pandemic talk, as is inevitable, but I can certainly promise that we'll have, certainly for the first 3 months of the recap, we won't be talking about it too much. And Adam Jones as well, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yeah, no Brewdog this year, but my conservatory is a sufficient substitute. But yeah, it's the 1 year anniversary of my debut. So no, I'm looking forward to it and getting stuck into it.
Absolutely. We've got plenty of awards, good and bad, to be handing out in a bit. And before we go on to that, big thank you to our sponsors, at-times Films, who have been with us all year. Massive thank you to them. It's not an easy time to be putting your hand in your pocket for yourself and the Patreon subscribers, to be helping us out, getting new equipment, finding our way with the bits and bobs that we need in terms of software and hardware. Always very helpful, always very thankful for them. All of the sponsorship and the Patreon subscribers, as I say, massive thank you to you, and a massive thank you to the listeners as well. I usually kind of reserve this for the end of the show, but not everyone makes it to the end of the show, understandably. It is absolutely vital that we have people to listen to us, because quite frankly, when you're doing a podcast and you're sat here on your own in your room without your friends in the pub to talk to and everything like that, and stuck in your flat and everything like that, it's just so nice to see the numbers on the dashboard of the podcast to say that people are actually listening to it. Anyone who sends in a question, anyone who clicks view, anyone who follows us on the YouTube or the Spotify, everything around it, it is a big bonus for us, and it is why we do it. And I think Reading fans, they deserve a couple of decent podcasts to listen to, don't they? And I like to think we include ourselves in that. So without further ado, let's get on then and recap the year that was 2020.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you Oz!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
Okay, as is inevitable, let's start with January. And January, actually, it would fit a better narrative if January had started badly, I think, because, as the year has gone on, Reading, you could argue, have gradually improved. But actually, the end of 2019 was 3 wins in a row. The 1st of January 2020, that became 4 wins in a row, with a win at Fulham, who obviously went on to be promoted. And Reading were 14th in the league off the back of that run. Mark Bowen was only a couple of weeks away from having a new contract given to him to take him past the end of the season and to make him the proper Reading FC manager. And really, it was a difficult time, wasn't it, Sim? As we came out of that Fulham game, the question on our mind was, are we seriously thinking about the playoffs? And it was certainly a nice way to start the year.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And to be honest, that game at Fulham was probably one of my highlights of the entire year. It really felt like the old classic Reading was back. Being able to win in those big games in front of a big travelling away contingent, and it was just a marvellous day to start the year off. But really the story of the next couple of weeks, and indeed the next couple of months, was missing Lucas João. And it was very evident that he was so crucial in that 4-game winning run. He scored a few goals, but he was also bringing others into play, as we've seen play out so much later on in the year with his form this season. But it was very much about his absence from the team that was really kind of the crucial element early on in the season, early on in the year, rather.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? We then went into a period of of thinking, maybe we can do playoffs. And there was that mad game against Fulham. Obviously, the FA Cup had a lot of games as well, as we kept having to go through replays. And there was that 11th of January, the Reading 1, Nottingham Forest 1, with a 96th minute winner. Well, not really, 97th minute equaliser to keep Reading on a decent run of form. And Ollie, at that period, did we really think that playoffs was a proper prospect? Because certain fans did.
Yeah, look, I think whenever you go into the new year on a 4-game winning run, especially after that Fulham game, there's always going to be a load of optimism. And I've not got the table in front of me, but I don't think we were too many points off it, to be honest. I think that sort of 4-game winning run over Christmas really sort of shot us up the table. As I say, you go into a new year not knowing at all what 2020 had in store, and just full of optimism in so many ways. But yeah, it's tough. I think we saw sort of the potential of that Reading side over Christmas, and I think that's what gives you a lot of hope, is that you know that they can go and win these sorts of games. Going to Fulham, who obviously ended up getting promoted, but were on a great run at the time. Going away to Preston, who I think had a very good home record at the time as well. They weren't just wins; they were very, very impressive results as well. So that certainly gave a lot of people hope. But then we saw over the next sort of few weeks that perhaps it would be why this side was a more of a mid-table side, because you're losing 2-0 to Millwall. Those 2 games against Nottingham Forest that were a bit of a slog. The 1-1 draw against Hull City in February stands out to me as well as a game that just sort of reminded us is that we weren't quite there yet. But yeah, it was a good start to the year. But as you say, with that Mark Bowen contract, almost the same sort of scenario that Olly Gunnar Solskjaer found himself in about 12 months previously, where you hand a manager a contract extension and suddenly it starts to go downhill. I don't know how much of a correlation there is between that, but there was certainly a remarkable drop-off where Mark Bowen signed that contract extension.
Yeah, I remember that game against Hull, watching that. I was actually at work watching it on a stream and being 1-0 up against Hull, who obviously went on to be relegated at home, and you think, yeah, it's just a win, just get it over and done with, but concede the late equaliser. And that actually contributed to a run after the Fulham game. Reading only won 1 of their league games in the next 10. And this basically meant that, Adam, we found ourselves in that scenario that Reading fans have been all too familiar with recently, is that you get to, the end of January effectively, certainly, with a few months left of the season, and you're just aware that the season's pretty much over, which is just, I'd argue it's one of the worst feelings in football.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, after the last few seasons of dross, we needed some excitement, and unfortunately, winning, one game in 10 was just not good enough, and kind of confirmed really that we'd be in mid-table again. We didn't know if we'd be in lower mid-table or high, a little bit higher up, but it was very, very disappointing. The thing for me is the fact that we weren't that bad defensively. I think barring the Wigan game, which was a 3-0, and I think the Millwall game was a 2-0 loss, I think we only lost the games in that run by about a goal, or I think it was a goal. So that for me was very disappointing. You could tell, as Ollie said earlier, and Simeon, we just missed Lucas Shaw so much, and we just weren't good enough going forward. I mean, it was often the case under Nigel Adkins before he got sacked, where we'd score a lot, we'd score for fun, but we conceded just as many. And we kind of had the opposite problem under Marc Mayo. We could defend, and especially with Michael Morrison in there, we were, pretty solid at times, but unfortunately we didn't have enough going forward. And that was a huge, huge problem. And, even now it's affecting us because we didn't manage to sign, Mendes in the summer, and it was gutting, to be honest. I think that lack of attacking threat in the end cost Marc Bowen his job.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And probably the one thing that you would say, I kind of had it in my mind that we had a bit of a cup run, but getting to the 5th round, I suppose it's because we played 2 replays, it felt it was longer than it was, but getting to the 5th round of the cup was a good thing. You'd have to say that did kind of basically, it took us into March basically as a thing to look forward to. There was the Blackpool game, which we somehow got through to a replay and then won that quite comfortably. The Cardiff game, which then we went to a replay for, and that certainly, I mean, Olly, you were at that game in Cardiff, that 3-3 draw went to penalties. That was probably, you'd have to say, one of the most entertaining games of the 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll get on to the awards later, but I had that down as one of my golden moments of the year, which sounds a bit sad, really, based off the fact it's a fourth round replay win on a shootout against Cardiff. But I was looking back over the year, and that was actually the only. Well, we didn't even win the game in 90 minutes, but I didn't actually see in the flesh Reading win a game in 90 minutes this year. So that was as close as I came to some sort of euphoria. It was a great evening. Also we played them in the league 3 days before. In Cardiff, I think playing Cardiff 3 times in 10 days, and obviously twice away as well. So it was good for me being in uni in Cardiff. But yeah, that was the game I would say probably that I can think of that brought me the most joy this year. Just to the fact, we were 2-0 down, looked as if we were going to be heading out of the cup, pulled it back to 2-2. Goals from both academy graduates, Rinamotta and Omar Richards. Took it to extra time, went 3-2 down, thought we were going to go out again. Yaku Mato pops up and makes it 3-3. And then obviously winning on a shootout's always a really nice feeling, with Shoni Aluko popping up with the winning penalty, which was a bizarre feeling. So yeah, there weren't that many games that I've enjoyed as much as that this year. Yeah,
it certainly is. I mean, you say I've gone through the results, and as depressing as it is, I've not seen a win in the flesh in 2020 either, I don't think. I mean, before the lockdown, we only had the Fulham, Sheffield Wednesday, we beat Barnsley at home, and then Birmingham away, which was our final pre-lockdown game, as it were. And Sim, that was a game you were at. 3-1 win at Birmingham at St Andrews was again a fantastic comeback. Really, is perhaps not the first half was brilliant, but the second half, 3 goals to bring us back to that. And that sort of feeling as you came away from that game, obviously had no idea, really, did we, that was going to be, or obviously had some idea there was going to be problems, but no idea that was going to be our last game with Reading fans for God knows how many 9 months it was. And what were your feelings coming out of that game and feeling like how the club was at that point?
It seemed to be not too bad at that point. It was kind of frustrating that we were capable of both really bad games and performances like the Wigan one, but we were also capable of putting in really good performances like Sheffield Wednesday as well, of course, and Birmingham as well. Not a perfect performance, but we were capable of grinding out results, riding out a tough first half, and then getting a couple of set-piece goals in the second half and winning the game. And it went to show that there was some progress under Bowen at that point. We were capable of getting results like that. It was just the really poor consistency that we had at that point. And in a broader sense, with regards to kind of the upcoming lockdown, at that point, I had no idea that we were going to kind of go that long without football. I think there was probably even a sense that we were going to go ahead with the Stoke game the next week after that. And it was just it was a complete surprise, but it was kind of, I guess in hindsight, it was kind of nice being able to enjoy an away game like that Birmingham one without any real sense that it was going to be your last one. You just enjoyed it as a normal away game, basically. And it's something that we've not had in so long, and it's going to be so long until we're back in a really packed stadium with away fans as well. So it was, in hindsight, it was a special day and good to get a win in it.
Yeah, I sent you an article series idea the other day, didn't I, saying for when we get away fans back, and you did say, well, it's not something we need to do yet, but it's something that popped into my head as to eventually you'd think we get it back. And this is the thing, obviously lockdown came in, we can hit the fast forward button until, the 7th of March was the Birmingham game, the 20th of June, Reading played Stoke at home, it was a 1-1 draw. Lucas Shaw scored, and then we conceded in the last minute. Obviously, it's my comedy moments. We'll get onto that in a little bit. But from the lockdown form onwards, as we've just spoken about, the Reading, they had 3 wins in 5 pre-lockdown, which is good enough run. But before that, obviously, we talk about the pretty, not brilliant run that Reading had post the new year. So for then Reading to have only got 2 wins post-lockdown, they beat Luton 5-0. Yaku Mate doing brilliantly to get 4 goals in one game. And we also, dragged out a win against Charlton away from home. And Adam, really, this lockdown form, you can put it in isolation and say that the circumstances meant that Reading players had dropped off, we had nothing to play for, etc., etc. But in reality, it probably wasn't that different to the sort of form we had going into lockdown anyway.
Well, yeah, that's true. And also, all teams were in the same boat. So, I mean, I'm not sure if we could really use that as a sort of kind of excuse in a way. I'm not sure if it was a sudden downturn. I mean, we'd won our previous 2 games before lockdown, obviously against Birmingham City, the last away game, and the one before that against Barnsley. But I think it's because we've been so used to not doing well over the past few seasons, it didn't feel like a sudden downturn in form, even if it was. I think, against Nottingham Forest, I think even though we got the late equaliser against Forest at home, it felt like it kind of knocked the stuffing out of us in a way and drained us of mental energy. And I think the Stoke game drained us as well, because we took the lead quite early on, I think, through Lucas João. And then, as you say, last minute, Nick Powell gets in and heads in. And from there, you're thinking, well, they've got the likes of Derby have got the likes of Tom Lawrence and Wayne Rooney in the next game. And, it might not be very good for us, which perhaps, may fit into one of the comedy moments with Miazga's slap at the end of Tom Lawrence. But yeah, I didn't feel like it was a sudden downturn. I think we've got to take into account the opposition as well, because I think the following game after that was Brentford. So yeah, I mean, perhaps we were expecting to lose against some of them, but no, it wasn't a sudden real shock for me. But no, it was definitely disappointing, especially after the new year and the form that we were kind of in with 4 straight wins.
Yeah, well, Reading started 2020 in 14th. They finished the season in 14th, and that was our best finish for a number of years, apart from the playoff season. That was our best finish in about 5 or 6 years, I think, which meant that Mark Bowen, generally speaking, I think we went into that summer, no one really thought, there are a few fans on Twitter saying, we should sack him, move on, he hasn't done very well. I was happy to give him the benefit of the doubt for how the lockdown had changed things, and obviously Reading had nothing to play for, so it's hard when there's no fans to rally yourself. There were certainly not many murmurings that Bowen was going to go as the summer began. Obviously, it was quiet on the transfer front, and we went into pre-season sim with a 3-6-1 formation under Mark Bowen, which was, I wasn't certain it was going to be a great plan, but it was a plan, and it looked like Reading had a theory of how to approach the season. And to have, firstly, I suppose the question is, how do you think the season would have kind of panned out to this point if Mark Bowen and that system had been kept in?
I don't think it would have really panned out as anything like as good as it has done. It's not just about the system, it's about essentially how much confidence the players had in him. And you could tell that probably towards the end, they weren't really playing for him. There wasn't that level of inspiration that he managed anything like what Pauno has done. But it was an interesting tactical idea, to be honest, the 3-6-1. I think he said it was supposed to be modelled on kind of what United have done, Sheffield United have done, and the Wolves have done previously as well, with a kind of a possession-based back three. But the frustrating thing for me is that this is the kind of thing that he should have done a lot earlier in the year. We were going through a lot of the spring, a lot of kind of early 2020, thinking, what is the tactical idea? What is his philosophy? What is he trying to build towards? And particularly when you're going through a season thinking, we're not going to get into the playoffs, we might as well be getting ready for next season. He could have been introducing this 3-6-1 in February or March or anything like that, or even after lockdown, rather, with that project restart period. And it's that kind of lack of proper coherent thinking, that long-term thinking, that probably fed into the decision to get rid of him as much as anything else.
Yeah, I do remember that was one of the games I got to go to, was the Spurs friendly. Went and covered that for work, and that was a situation of going down and it's kind of looking for Ovie Ejaria. Oh, there's Ovie Ejaria. Yep, we're signing him. We'd already signed Josh Lawan. It kind of looked like Mark McNulty, Jordan Holsgrove might be playing a sort of part at that point, but it did appear that Mark Bowen was going to be on the way out. There were certain names thrown around, but Mark Bowen took the team for that game, and I remember speaking to him afterwards. when he did this kind of off-the-record press briefing, and he basically said that he'd just been told a week earlier that he was going to be going, and that he'd heard this new bloke was going to be coming in. He'd had a couple of texts with him, and it was all very up in the air, and it was all very uncertain. And personally, I found it really annoying that the club had taken this long to make the decision. If you wanted to sack the manager, you could have done it the day after the Swansea game that ended the previous season. Why we'd gone through that period of waiting it out, I mean, it's beyond me, and I don't know why we did it. But Ollie, what did you find of the sacking of Bowen? Did you find that the timing was wrong? Were you happy with it? Obviously, with hindsight, I guess we can't really complain that much.
Yeah, I think it was the timing that was the thing for me, and sort of the way that Bowen was treated or mistreated. People are going to have their opinions on whether it was the right thing to do. Even without hindsight, there were, as you say, sort of murmurings at the end of the previous season whether Bowen's opinion, people's opinion of Bowen had clearly dropped. The way we ended the season was incredibly disappointing. 3 defeats on the bounce, 10 goals conceded in 3 games, and that 4-1 home defeat to Swansea on the final day was just a complete capitulation. And I don't think Bowen was particularly, his sort of approval rating had clearly dropped since the start of the calendar year. But yeah, it was the timing for me, and the way that Bowen was treated. As you say, what's the difference in making that change then and just after that Swansea game, because you've given him the whole pre-season to, as you say, implement that 3-6-1 to try a new system out, and to then let him go. It was just bizarre. And I think, yes, you can say in hindsight it's clearly worked with the way we started this season and the way and the impact that Veljko Paunovic has had. But for me, that doesn't take away how badly Marc Bowen was treated. The club appointed Paunovic without even acknowledging that Marc Bowen had gone, which for me sort of really stuck. And yeah, it wasn't handled in the best way. We know that football is a ruthless business, but for me that made me feel a bit uneasy, just because that wasn't the club that I knew really. That this was a thing that sort of Leeds did, that Watford did, that sacked managers every 6 months and didn't treat managers with respect, and that didn't quite sit right with me. So yeah, that was a real low point for me of the year when Bowen was sacked. And obviously we can say in hindsight maybe it was the right decision, but that whole sort of saga, just 2 weeks before the start of the season, it was not ideal preparation, and the way it was handled in general didn't sit right with me.
Well, it was not the only change that we did make that summer, because Dayon Pang was hired as the new CEO, a person who I've been told has been around the club for a year or so beforehand anyway, even if we hadn't necessarily heard of him. Was very linked to Dayon, the owner of the club, or joint owner of the club. And I suppose this is the thing, isn't it, really, Adam, that when it comes to the owner's decisions, we can debate how he does transfers and everything like that. But when it has come to the manager decisions, you have to accept that every time he's made a change, we have traded up. We have gone from Paul Clement to Jose Gomez was the trade up. Jose Gomez to Marc Bowen was trading up. Marc Bowen to Veljko Paunovic has so far proven to be trading up. So there is kind of method in the madness. And it's funny, Ollie, that you said about Watford, because they sacked their manager yesterday, I think. I hadn't even had a chance to learn his name yet, but he's gone. And I suppose it's kind of, we're muddling through in a way, and yet it has kind of, when Veljko Paunovic came in, what did you think of him, Adam? What did you find that was impressive or perhaps unimpressive about Paunovic on kind of the first couple of weeks he was in charge?
It was a weird one, because we'd heard from Chicago Fire fans that he was awful and he was this and he was that. And then we started to really, really worry. And then there was one particular thing that I think multiple people had said about him not having a specific system and actually changing things around and being a bit of a tinkerman like Ranieri. And for me, that was a good thing in a way, because it felt like over the past couple of years, we've lacked a plan B. And we kind of needed that. But in a way, we didn't know if he would have a set certain system. Now, we know that he does now. So that's quite good. But at the start, we were obviously very worried. the one thing that was giving me hope about Paunovic was the fact that he'd won, I think it was the Under-20 World Cup with Serbia. And for me, we need someone here at the Majestic to work with younger players and really kind of install an identity, a vision, a playing style. And we needed someone here, and we still do need someone here for the long run. It's going to stay here for years and years because, you know, over the past couple of years, as you've been saying, we've been muddling along. And, you know, I don't really criticise the owners because each time, including Mark Bowen, actually, I've been like, yeah, it's time for you to go. But yeah, for me, it was just a very, very weird time. And, you know, his first game actually was against Derby County away on the first league game of the season. I think that just shows how, I thought how poorly it was handled. But no, I was very pessimistic, I have to say. I put down 16th as my league prediction. But no, I think, you know, he's proved me wrong so far. Haven't been in the greatest form recently, but yeah, it was just a very, very strange time for all of us, I think.
One of the strange things as well was this is pandemic hitting more than anything, I suppose, is that there was such a mass exodus of under-23 players over the summer, which was just, that just wasn't nice to see, partly because obviously we want these under-23 players to go on and be first teamers. Realistically, that's not going to happen for all of them, but you still like to have a strong under-23 team, players going out on loan, having the chance, because quite often it's the ones that you don't expect, or sometimes at least it's the ones you don't expect, that have a great stint on loan and then come back and have a chance in the team and everything like that. And that can, as a club, you like to spread out the options as much as you can, I think, with young players. And we had to say, just 5 or 6 under-23 players, the only ones we could keep. And obviously with the new signings, quite limited. Ovia Jari got dragged out for profit and sustainability reasons, kind of FFP regulations, you'd imagine, were the things holding us back there. Obviously got him over the line in the end. Josh Lawan signing on a free. Nelson Semedo, Lewis Gibson, Thomas Estevez were loaned in. We had Rodrigo Riquelme train with the club and then not sign. He went to Bournemouth on loan, which is ridiculous. Like, there's no way you can justify that. Well, I don't know why we didn't get that deal over the line. And Sim, we went into the season then with a squad that we thought was good. We thought it was a decent team. You'd certainly say there's a lot of creativity in that. But it hadn't really changed, so we certainly didn't really know what was going to come, did we?
No, exactly. And I think the hope was essentially that a narrower squad, a leaner squad, would be able to perform better than last one. Because you look at the squad we've had in the last couple of years, and it's just been far too big. We've had too many players kind of sitting on the sidelines, not being able to contribute properly. Players who are of decent quality, actually, and would otherwise have been playing in a smaller squad. And that was the good thing about the recruitment in the summer, that we were able to get out so many players. And we brought in some good individual talent, like Lauren, who obviously was more of a Bowen signing than anything else, having been linked in January. But it was that kind of rebalancing as much as specifically who came in and who went out that kind of allowed a lot of players that we had at the club before, people like Zhao and I guess Elise as well, to come through and play more regularly and play with more focus and better kind of and better focus basically this season.
Well, and that what happened next? We'll talk about the kind of level of pessimism and optimism that we had in a second. But Olly, I'm going to throw you the fun question, as I've dubbed it on the plan. Reading won 4 in a row and 7 of their first 8 in the league under Paunovic. Even the most optimistic fan didn't think this was going to happen. And why did it happen?
Yeah, it's the big question that I'm not quite sure anyone really knows the answer to. It was a huge surprise to every Reading fan, really, and I'm sure probably to Paunovic himself as well. But yeah, I think it was just a confidence thing for me. I think he cut down the squad, and as Sim said, it was a tight knit squad. And the problem over the last few years is that this squad has been, too bloated, and there's been players sitting on the sidelines, which hasn't been great for morale. But I think he appeared to instill this fantastic team spirit and this confidence in the team that that perhaps they needed, and perhaps that Bowen wasn't giving them. And then when you get that first win, we haven't won on the opening day for such a long time. I think since Stam's first season, we hadn't won on the opening day. So I don't think you can sort of underestimate how big a boost that had to go on and then to get another one, to get 4 wins in a row, to get 7 from the 8. It's just a massive, massive confidence boost. And it was a settled side to an extent. Michael Olly came on massively. His improvement has been, one of the standouts of this season so far, and has massively contributed to how well Reading have done. Lucas Shaw hit top form. We spoke about how much we missed him in the second half of last season after that run over New Year. So to get him back fit, to get him back firing was amazing. And I think we saw that there is genuine quality in this Reading side, that there are players in this team who are top half championship players who could get Reading into the Premier League. And Paunovic seemed to strike a chord out of all of them, as I say, a settled system. We've not used that many players this season, and it seemed as though he'd settled on that side. Raphael is a reliable goalkeeper. Andy Yeardom, when he's fit, it is one of the best right backs in the league, and even Tom Zestevez and Tom Holmes coming in have been decent backups. Moore and Morrison are a good centre back pairing. Omar Richards has had a fantastic season so far before his injury. Josh Lawrence been a revelation alongside Andy Rinomota, and then it's a really dangerous front four, when they're fit, of Elise, Ajari, Mate and Zhao. So we've seen that there's real quality in this squad, and Paunovic just got it out of them. And obviously we've seen over the last few weeks when certain players get injured and heads do drop when we go behind. But the fact is that we weren't conceding at all, really. I think we had a fantastic defensive record. I'm looking at it now. I think from those first 8 games, we kept 6 clean sheets, I think it was. So the defence certainly helped, and it just seemed to be sort of riding a wave at that point.
Yeah, Reading didn't fall behind in a game until what was it? The Coventry game, I think it was the 9th game of the season. We'd conceded to Cardiff in the last minute, bit of a consolation. Blackburn had pegged us back a couple times on the 8th week of the season, then Coventry, and we'll talk about what happened from Coventry onwards in just a second. But Adam, for that first, that first 8 games, 7 wins and a 0-0 draw at Middlesbrough, what was the kind of most enjoyable aspect of it for you? Was it a sense that we were just picking up points, we were being professional? Was it maybe that we're being quite entertaining? Was it the satisfaction of kind of being so defensively comfortable that actually for those first few weeks of the season there weren't many times you sat back and thought, oh God, not again, because we just weren't conceding goals?
For me, I think it's the latter. I think it was defensively, and I kept on tweeting every single game. I think it was from about the 5th game. I was like, we've only conceded 1 goal in 450 minutes. Then that turned into 540 minutes of championship football. And then it turned into 630 minutes of over 630 minutes of championship football. So for me, it was the defence and how solid we were at the back, and the way that Liam Moore has kind of grown under Veljko Paunovic, because under Mark Bowen, I don't think him and Moore really got along very well. So the fact that Moore has come in and has formed a really good partnership this season alongside Michael Morrison, well, certainly in the first 7 or 8 games anyway, was very heartening, actually. And you saw it in the 11-12 season when we got promoted. Having a great defence breeds confidence in the forwards and in the midfield. So for me, it was just fantastic to see we were defensively solid, but we were also scoring. And even now, we don't seem to have any trouble scoring, even though we've kind of regressed a bit defensively. So for me, it was just fantastic seeing us defend properly. And you've got to remember as well, Mark Bowen had adopted a 3-6-1 system at the start of the season, at the start of pre-season. And the chance of Paunovic, carrying on with that system was very little, probably, about 10% or something, probably even lower. But for me, I think, it was a fact that we managed to adapt so well. And it was just unbelievable looking at the screen and seeing that we were, constantly in the lead. And for me, it was just absolutely unbelievable to see us do so well. So, I think defensive solidity, and then going forwards, we've also been fantastic. So, if you combine the two together, then that's a very good mix.
Yeah, and that start, I think Poundvich deserves a huge amount of credit for it. The players obviously deserve credit for it. And the fact is that, as we alluded to earlier, we didn't predict it. Certainly this podcast, we had our pre-season preview. I think it was between 13th and 17th was basically where we were placing the team for the end of the season. And that, I mean, the thing is with that is that the pessimism, I certainly don't feel bad about the pessimism, because there was all of the reasons to be pessimistic that you could want, sort of the timing of changing manager, the new manager being unheard of, and the general state of the team has been pretty poor over the last couple of years. So the signs for doing badly were certainly there, Sim, but were we missing something? Were the signs really there to suggest that we were actually going to be doing quite well?
Yeah, I guess with the individual talent we had last season, we saw flashes of it with, say, Lee coming through in, I think, around about January of this year, starting to get that run at Jari through last season as well. But really, it was about whether we could get that individual talent out on a regular basis. Zhao as well, Swift as well. Obviously, hasn't played too much this season. But it's a little bit hard to know how well someone like Paunovic is going to do that when he comes through. He doesn't have a lot of managerial experience, certainly not in English football. So trying to kind of work out how well he's going to do that is very difficult.
And then, well, I mean, from then on, it's not been brilliant, to say the least. I suppose you can pick out a few games, and certainly there have been a few hard done by games that Reading have had. The individual errors, obviously 4 defeats in a row. Off the back of that, there have been 3 wins in the last 12, and Reading are now just outside the playoffs. At the end, it was always, we had a big lead at the start. No one expected that to hold on. And then I think after that 3rd defeat, the Stoke game went from 1st to 6th. And this is the thing in the Championship. There's always those clubs snapping at your heels. And certainly Norwich and Bournemouth, the clubs that have come down this year, have been able to Bournemouth even lost their manager. And yet I would still say they've been able to maintain a remarkable level of stability and consistency that Championship teams, certainly relegated teams, do not usually have, because of the pandemic and because the parachute payments means that they have not had to sell their players or lost their squads or anything like that. It means that it's a really tough year to go up, I think. And Olly, since the last few weeks, the form has been okay. Won against a bad Forest team, beat Bristol City, who are doing well, beat QPR away, that's a good win. But there have been the defeats, and obviously we're talking after the Brentford game. So it has just kind of settled things back down a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, look, we're not doing badly. Look, as you say, we're only outside of the playoffs on goal difference, and what is it? We're on 33 points. We're only 3 points off third. So I think obviously the start to the season we had, raised expectations. I think people would be disappointed now if we didn't get into the top 6 based off the start we had. So it's always going to be frustrating whenever we lose a game, especially in the last 2 games, and we've played 2 real top sides in Norwich and Brentford, and obviously got nothing out of it. But we've obviously not had the best of luck with injuries. But I am hesitant to use that as an excuse, because I know a lot of teams have, and Norwich especially have had injury problems over the last few weeks and months, and yet still 5 points clear at the top of the table. So yeah, as you say, it's an incredibly difficult division this year, but it is ridiculously tight. Swansea in 3rd on 36 goes down to us in 8th on 33, and even below us, you've got Bristol City on 30, Cardiff on 29. It's still wide open for a lot of teams to get into that top 6. But the good thing is that Reading are one of those teams, and I think all we could really have asked for at the start of the season before any of this happened is that Reading improved upon last season, and look, already we've done that. We're on 33 points, so we're already well over halfway to our points total from last season. So yeah, it's as I say, expectations have been raised by the start to the season, but it was never going to be sustainable. Not to get into XG terms, but look, winning seven of the first 8, you're never going to get that throughout the whole season. So yeah, just to be in and around that bunch going into the Christmas period, and get some key players back fit, hopefully make a couple of signings in January, and the squad looks very, very healthy to hopefully sort of continue and try and stay in and around the playoffs for the rest of the season.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. We'll talk about what's coming in 2021 in the end of the show, but really for where Reading are at the moment, I think it's the thing that every fan would have taken, even as those results, the first couple of wins were coming in, the sense that we were going to stroll to the title, just I wouldn't put any credence into that, and the sense that we're going to push for the playoffs is absolutely there. So it's certainly something that Reading can build on, and we'll talk about 2021 in just a bit, but that rounds off 2020. There are only a couple of things left to do, and that's to hand out some awards. So let's get on and do that now.
For all the latest Reading news, analysis and opinion, visit the website at tilehurstend.com.
Right then, I hope we've all got our bow ties on and our tuxedos. It's the Reading FC Tilehurst End Awards for 2020. We'll have to, I think we'll have to tap our table. We can all unmute our microphones and tap our tables for applause as each one is handed out. And let's start then with the Player of the Year award. Alex McCarthy claimed the first TTE Player of the Year award in 2013. We had Jordan Abita 14, Oliver Norwood 2015, Ali Al-Habsi in 2016, Liam Moore in 2017, John Daddy Podvarson in 2018, and last year's winner was Ovi Ejaria. So, Sim, I'm going to throw over to you for your first nomination.
It's got to be Michael Morrison for me. The sheer consistency he's had, and I think he's played pretty much every minute in the league this season. I think maybe missed the Derby game after lockdown ended earlier on this year. But after that, apart from that, he's been very consistent. He's been a crucial part of a defence that's been a lot more solid than before he joined the club. And you can tell that by the experience and leadership he brings, he really adds so much to the team, and he's a really good influence on other players around him. And he's going to be he was a big contender for Player of the Season last year, and he should be again this year.
Ollie, what are you thinking?
I'm also tempted to go with Michael Morrison. I'm thinking about Raphael, and look, he's had a great year, Raphael. Make no mistake about it. But just the errors have obviously crept in to his game this season. He had a fantastic end to last year. He had a fantastic entire season last year, but in terms of 2020, he finished the campaign really strongly. But yeah, just because of those errors that have crept in the last 2 weeks, I'd probably go with Michael Morrison. A brief mention for Yaku Meito, who perhaps doesn't get the praise he deserves sometimes, but he's been a consistent goal scorer for us. But yeah, I would have to agree with Sim and go with Michael Morrison.
Yeah, we've had a couple mentions, put a call out for some mentions on Twitter, and we had a couple people say Yaku Meito, who I think is a decent shout. Adam, you've gone for someone else though, haven't you?
Yeah, I decided to go with someone a bit different. Maybe this isn't the best idea after Saturday's error, but I went with Raphael because of the journey that he's been on. I don't think he spoke English when he came here, and now he's very, very proficient in it, and is given interviews and has just done very well. I couldn't imagine really learning another language completely fluently. So for him to do that and to really put the work in is just a testament to the character that he really is. I guess we're talking post-Brentford here, but he has bounced back from previous mistakes in the season, and is definitely in with a shout despite his error at the weekend. And also, let's just say that he had to live up to the expectations of Emi Martinez. I thought we would miss Emi Martinez like we did with Al-Habsi after he went after 2016-17. But Raphael has done very well, made some match-winning saves, especially against QPR in that Christmas period last year, and has made some, I think it was that triple save as well on New Year's Day. So I've gone with Raphael, but obviously Michael Morrison, as the other two have said, has been brilliant. But also, if it was just dedicated to this season, I think two more names will go in the hat: Josh Laurent and Omar Richards. Omar Richards because of how much he's improved, and Josh Laurent because of not only has he had to deal with a managerial change, but he's also had to make the step up from League One to the Championship. And for me, he's just been absolutely exceptional this season, regardless of the defeats. But for me, overall, Raphael gets my nomination but Morrison is very close.
Yeah, I'm going to go with someone different. My nomination is Lucas Shaw because wasn't in the team much in last season. Only played a couple games in 2020 for the first half with scoring against Stoke and then in the Fulham win as well. And his absence was so keenly felt. And obviously, we know he's done so well, banging in the goals and playing so well. Obviously, again, absence keenly felt recently. So my nomination is for Lucas Shaw. But as we always go with the player who has the most nominations, it is Michael Morrison, who is the Tilehurst End Player of the Year for 2020. Congratulations to Michael, and a kindly tap on the table, which I'm probably going to have to edit out because that wasn't very good. But let's go on then to the Most Improved Player Award. And this, I think this has been a bit of the curse of the Improved Player Award over the last few years. Jordan Abita, Jake Cooper, Nick Blackman, Gareth McCleary, Liam Kelly, Yaku Mate, and John Swift have all won it in previous years. John Swift winning it last year. I guess he has succumbed to the curse because he's been injured for a lot of 2020. Nominations. I'm gonna throw it to you first, Ollie, to hear yours.
I mean, there's probably two main ones here, and that's Michael Elise and Omar Richards. I'd lean towards Elise, I think, just based off the fact if you're comparing sort of his first half of 2020 to his second half of 2020, there's no doubting he was a clear talent in the second half of last season, but sort of did lack that end product. But then to come into this season and to become pretty much the most vital player, perhaps Lucas Shaw aside, in Reading's team, with goals, assists, with moments of skill, with quality deliveries from set pieces that have been huge for us. And he's come on so much this year. Even when he wasn't scoring goals and assists last year, he was still a huge part of the team, and he's very rarely missed a game this year. Obviously, he's not always started matches, but he's always been involved in games. And if you're comparing him to him last year, he's come on massively. And I think we're not going to be within this. He's not going to be at Reading this time next year. I don't think. He's clearly a very, very talented player, and will be snapped up, I'd imagine. Hopefully not in January, but definitely in the summer if we don't win promotion. So yeah, it's got to be Michael Elise for me.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Not as you say because he was particularly bad before, but the way that he has come on has been so impressive, and he's undroppable now. Whether you play him out wide and in the centre, he is certainly a player that has developed so much over the last 12 months. What are you going to say, Sim?
Omar Richards is a shoe-in for me. He's been so impressively consistent this season. He's really nailed down that left back spot, and consider where he was earlier on in the season, earlier on in the year rather, when he was competing with Tyler Blackett and Jordan Abita, and there was no real, even a clear sense that he was going to stay here this season. It was very much up in the air. It was very kind of inconsistent, that position, and to emerge from all of that this season and not only play regularly and prove that he can play regularly, reliably for the first team, but he's also really put in some magnificent performances, and he's really come on as an attacking force as well. Consider that he's solid defensively. I think he's made maybe one mistake for a goal this season, but he's also come on really well as an attacking force as well. And I just want to look at a poll that we did this time last year. We asked people on Twitter where we thought Omar Richards, where they thought Omar Richards would be playing in 3 years. Back then, about 54%, so a majority thought he'd be in the Championship. And then we did the same thing recently, and 82% think he's going to be in the Premier League, which goes to show just how much his stock has risen. And for a guy who, unlike Elise, wasn't really widely talked up as a big talent, as someone who's really going to kind of emerge and be a multi-million-pound player in a few months down the line, it's really impressive from Richards, and I'm delighted we've had him, and hopefully we can get him tied down for a new contract.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Richards has been fantastic. I personally have always rated him, so that's why I've not gone for most improved player, because I thought he's always been pretty decent, but I totally understand the case that you're making. Adam, are you Richards or Elise or someone else? I mean, I suppose you could throw in maybe an honourable mention for Sonny Aluko if you really wanted to, Liam Moore as well.
Yeah, I think Aluko has improved massively this season, and I think even this season he's been underrated for us because I think there's still the I'd say that the bad feeling from the previous seasons where he hasn't really performed up to expectations, even with with his price tag of 7 million or something like that. For me, unfortunately I'm going to have to tie it up as 2-2 because I'm going to go with Omar Richards purely for the fact that he's overcome doubters in the past. I think last season, there was doubts over whether he would actually be, whether he'd actually fulfill his potential. I remember hearing about him years ago when there being a lot of promise, and it was good seeing him make his debut at such a young age. But for me, he hasn't shown his full potential until this season, and because he's overcome these doubters, I think I'd give it to Richards. But as I say, Elise's ability has never really been doubted in a way. I think his first really good performance was against Birmingham City on the last day of the 18-19 season. And even though he performed well then, he's taken it to a completely different level this season compared to last season. But no, I've got to tie it up. It's going to be 2-2, I'm afraid, and I'm going to go with Omar Richards.
Well, luckily, as Twitter has spoken, a couple of people on Twitter have said Omar Richards. So I think that's as good a tiebreak as any. And Omar Richards, congratulations on being the most improved player in the Tilehurst End Awards of 2020, and commiserations for the ensuing downturn that this award tends to give people. So congratulations, Omar, and hopefully sign a new contract, please. The Hal Robson-Kanu Award for underachievement is next. We've had Hal Robson-Kanu win this in 2013 and 2014. Jordan Abita 2015, Jake Cooper 2016, both following on from their Most Improved Player awards. Sonia Luko took this in 17 and 18, and last year it was George Puskas. Adam, I'm going to throw this back to you for your nomination.
Danny Loader, for me, 100%. Won the Under-17 World Cup. Thought he was going to be absolutely fantastic. Showed what he could do in the under-23s, and then came into the first team. And even though he had limited opportunities, we didn't see that full potential and anything that would suggest to us that he would become world-class in the future like he was tipped to be, because he was the main man in the under-23s. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He even overshadowed Elise, and that's saying something. Although in saying that, despite him being released in the summer and despite him not really showing his potential and rejecting a contract, I think he'll quietly rise through the ranks at Porto. And despite people on Twitter saying, "Well, I haven't really heard of Danny Loader for a good few months now," I think he'll come through quietly, and don't be surprised to see him end up in the Premier League at some point, because he could show in the under-23s that he could play, and in the right environment, I think he'll go on to do very well. Which league he'll be in, I'm not sure if he'll be in the Premier League, but I think he'll be in one of the top 5 leagues in Europe, and I think we'll see his full potential at some point, and we may rue kind of him rejecting the contract.
Ollie, what are you thinking for this one?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Adam. I'd go with Danny Loader, but it's hard because I don't really blame Loader himself for it. I think it's almost circumstances out of his control. Really, he had a really tough final season at Reading. Really, obviously started with what seemed to be he was going to move to Wolves, and then I think he passed a medical, I'm pretty sure, and then the owners pulled it at the last minute, and I can't imagine how hard that must have been to deal with for him. And then from that moment on, he was just really stuck last season. He had the whole saga with his agent. Didn't get a new agent sort of tied down until sort of January, February time, which didn't really help him. So not entirely his fault, Danny Loader, but sort of based off the fact of the expectation that we had for him. And I wrote it on the Tilehurst End piece itself on how Loader is almost a victim of expectation, that people had such high hopes for him, perhaps too high hopes for him, and ultimately, to leave the club with one goal in 40-odd senior games, it isn't good enough ultimately.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's so much about whether you blame Danny or you blame the circumstances, and I think it's ultimately got to be a bit of both. And what happens with Danny Loader, we wish him all the best. We do hope he has a good career. He's a Reading lad at the end of the day. We like our own to do well. and we hope he does well at Porto. He certainly seems to be getting a good chance out of it so far. But Sim, are you going to complete what could be a clean sweep?
You know, I was going to, and Danny Loader was my original one, but as you say, he's a Reading lad. I don't really want to twist the knife on a guy who is, at the end of the day, a young talent who has good intentions of trying to make it in the game. And I don't doubt his character or anything like that, despite what has been kind of very loosely speculated on Twitter. I don't want to kind of just keep on going on at him, and I'm going to change mine and go for Mark Bowen. Actually, a bit of a cheat answer, just to kind of give a bit of variety to what would otherwise be a clean sweep. Mark Bowen is a guy who obviously came in and was doing so well at the beginning of the year, got that new contract deservedly on the basis of what he'd achieved up until then, and really terrific form with the 4 wins kind of going over the end of 2019 and into 2020. But after that, Reading just stagnated so much, didn't kick on when we had some really good individual young talent to bring the most out of. People like Ajara, people like Richards and Elise as well, and Mate. And you have to look at the first half of this year, and over the summer as well, of course, when we were playing, and look at it as a massive missed opportunity to really kick on and develop a style and to develop individual players. And when you look at how Paunovic has done so well this year, having not really had too much experience of Reading himself, but he's immediately come in and improved people like Ajaria and Elise as well, and Richards. You have to look back at Bowen and think, actually, hang on, has he underperformed in his own right, in his management of the team, both in terms of results and in terms of more broadly developing the club?
Yeah, it's a good shout. My personal nomination is for Mark McNulty, because once again he had a chance in the team over the summer and to show that he's got a championship level striker in him. I'm not, from what you kind of read and see on Twitter and stuff, not really entirely sure he's that bothered about playing for Reading. He wants to play in Scotland and be close to home, which is understandable. But at the end of the day, Reading paid a decent amount of money for him. He had a decent crack in the team. He wasn't good enough, and he had another crack in the team this summer and wasn't good enough. So he's my nomination for underachiever, and Danny Loader takes the award then. So, you know, hopefully you're doing well in Portugal, Danny. But that's the harsh nature of football, I suppose, at the end of the day, that when we hope you're going to do well for us and you go off and leave in such a whimper, it's not a great feeling for all round. So we'll move on then to a positive and the golden moment, the previous winners of the golden moment 2014, the success of the academy. What happened to that? The 2015 winner was the Bradford FA Cup win. Lucas Piazon clincher versus West Brom in the FA Cup a year later. Fulham in the second leg, that playoff win in 2017. Vito Minoni saving the penalty versus QPR in 18, and 2019, the Wigan comeback that basically kept us up. So I'm going to go for the first nomination then, and that is the roar of the URs for fans' return against, what game was it we actually returning again? It's Nottingham Forest, wasn't it? And that was just the sense of anticipation of having fans back, the very short-lived sense of getting back to normality that gave us, the actual, you know, the kind of visceral feeling of hearing it as the players came out to start the game. It was a beautiful moment, and it was one that Reading fans really painted themselves in a good light for, on national TV as well, on Sky Sports, which was fantastic. So that, I'd have to say, was my nomination for the golden moment of the year. Ollie, what are you going to say for this one?
Well, first of all, just looking back at that 2018 winner, the fact that Vito Men's penalty save won the golden moment just reminded me how awful 2018 was. But yeah, no, I had nominated, as I mentioned earlier, the penalty shootout win over Cardiff in the FA Cup, because that was probably the game that gave me the most sort of joy and euphoria this season. But I think you actually might have won me over with that first shout of yours against Nottingham Forest. Just after, you know, sort of the year that we've had and sort of the absence of fans for so long. I think that was a much-awaited moment, and it was just a really, obviously it's not going to happen for a while again now, but just that feeling of that there were fans finally back in the Madstad, and yeah, it was a top feeling.
Sam, what are you going to say?
It's got to be Charlie Adams' goal at Fulham on New Year's Day, all the way back at the beginning of the year, and it was one of those moments that I know it's kind of it's probably been overshadowed by results later on in the year, but you look at what it was as an experience for those who were there, thousands of people crammed into an away end, which feels bizarre to say at the minute, but it was one of those kind of really euphoric split-second moments when you can tell you've won the game, players celebrating in front of fans going ballistic and really, really reveling in the split-second moment, and it was really special. And I know we've had better results than that later on in the year. We've had better performances, I would guess, but for the way we kind of enjoyed it at the minute as a real kind of unique moment, particularly for it being someone like Charlie Adam popping up of all people in front of the away end to score that goal, it really was special, and I was delighted to be there.
Adam, what are you going to say then for your golden moment?
I was also going to say Charlie Adam versus Fulham, just because of, Fulham at the time were very high up in the table, and we'd won 3 games before against Derby, QPR and Preston, and this was just an amazing moment to see Charlie Adam of all people pop up and score the second to all but seal the victory. I know they got a consolation for them, but it was just an amazing moment. So I was originally going to go for that, but for me, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go with Zhao and his fourth goal versus the fourth goal versus Blackburn when we won 4-2 there, because I think it was our 7th win out of 8, as you said, and at that point we just thought, how long is this run going to carry on for? I thought after the previous game, I thought Blackburn are going to be quite a tough opponent. I thought they were going to bring the game to us, and I thought they were going to get something out of it. But it was just an absolutely remarkable result as well, a 4-2 of all scores. I predicted a 0-0 actually before that game, so that just goes to show, really, doesn't it, in terms of our predictions? But just that we thought that the Blackburn might have got back into it and got a 3-3 draw, but Zhao and the fourth goal, it was just absolute euphoria. And just after that game, I don't think I've been buzzing. I can't remember the last time I was that buzzing about Reading. So, absolutely fantastic. And we thought from there, perhaps we'd go on and secure a place, in amongst the promotion mix. Obviously, it hasn't worked out very well in recent times, but it's just absolutely fantastic to see us grab that fourth goal and be clinical as usual. But I think if there's 2 votes for the first roar after the fans' return, I'd be more than happy to see that, especially after the year that we've all had. I'd be more than happy to see that cast the winner. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that is going to be claiming the golden moment of 2020 then, is that first URs of fans being allowed back into the Madstad after 9 months away. And we go on to the worst moment now, with Birmingham beating Reading 6-1 in 2014. Imagine such a thing, winning in that year. Arsenal winning the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley in 2015 with Adam Federici's era. The handling of Brian McDermott's sacking in 16, Liam Moore's Wembley penalty in 2017, Ipswich beating Reading 4-0 in 2018, Fulham beating Reading 4-1 in 2019, and it might well be following a similar pattern in 2020 with Sim. What are you going to nominate for this one?
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of a bit of a run of embarrassing home defeats. I think we're going to be in, because mine is Wigan at home, a properly dire. I'm trying to describe it with clean language. It's a properly dire evening where everything seemed to go wrong. Reading seemed to reach a proper new low. Basically, it was awful tactically. It was awful in terms of the experience for the fans, in terms of individual performances, Mark Bowen's approach generally, and it was just, if you could make essentially the epitome of an awful match in the Madejski, it would probably be that. And it was kind of probably the worst thing about it was that it was in front of fans, and we didn't have lockdown at that point, because it would have saved a lot of people a lot of sanity.
Yeah, well, I think my nomination is it's going to be specifically that Liam Moore reaction to the third goal and just kind of not even walking back to stop the third goal, which was so emblematic, as you say. The other thing I would probably say as an honourable mention is the decision for fans to not be allowed back after being back from the Norwich game. From then on, for Reading to be put in tier 3, then tier 4, and probably by the time this podcast goes out, tier 6 or 7, was just so demoralising on obviously personal as well as footballing levels, but certainly for the footballing levels, that Wigan at home takes it for me. Adam, are you going to say any different? Or
I went with Wigan as well. 3-0 home loss, absolute dross. Notable mention I thought was a 3-0 loss against Brentford. I think it was slightly later on, post-lockdown. Because, I remember that game because fans were absolutely fed up at that point. Post-match on Twitter, people were saying, get Bowen out and that sort of thing. And then after that, we went on to win 5-0 against Luton, draw against Huddersfield, and then win against Charlton. So it kind of brushed that under the carpet. But no, I don't think you could beat that 3-0 home loss. That was just absolutely awful. Didn't even get on the score sheet. And has there been a home game where we felt worse since that Burton game, that 500th home game where we lost 2-1, and that losing goal was absolutely farcical. But no, a notable mention was the 3-0 against Brentford, and maybe even the Sheffield Wednesday penalty appeals, and just the fact that we should have won, and having so many appeals rejected. It was just so disheartening to see 3 or 4 clear penalty shouts waved away. I thought that was absolutely farcical, but no, I have to agree in terms of the fact that the worst moment of 2020 has to be Wigan. That was just awful.
Ollie, is it going to be a clean sweep?
Yeah, I can't look past that Wigan game, to be honest. You all pretty much summed it up. I can't think of a game this year that made me more genuinely angry. There's been games where I've been disappointed at defeats and obviously stuff like that, but it was the game that really made me just angry, as you say, especially with that Liam Moore at the end. You said it all. It was a horrible night.
Yes, well, there we go then. The worst moment of 2020 was letting Wigan beat us 3-0 at home, and quite frankly, the team not really doing anything to stop it is how it goes. So let's have a chuckle then with the comedy moment of 2020. Previous winners of the Comedy Moment Award include Burnley's pitch invasion, or our pitch invasion against Burnley, that should be, in 2014 when we had not made the playoffs. Lady Sassama's song in 2015. I mean, that still pops up now and again on Twitter. People saying, what are Reading fans doing? And we all just say, it was 5 years ago, chill out. How Hobson Kanu scoring in the quarter-final of the Euros against Belgium, that amazing goal for Wales, was the comedy moment in 2016. Lucas Piazon returning to troll Reading in 2017. Ipswich scoring from our own corner in 2018, and Mark Bowen's appointment, and the furore and the snakeisms and all the memes, everything going around about that in 2019. Now, I'm going to say the comedy moment for myself in 2020 was on June the 20th, Reading came back to play their first game after lockdown, over 3 months without football, against Stoke at home. And obviously fans aren't allowed in, so they said, you know what, we'll hold the iFollow service completely open to everyone. You can all just go and pay a tenner no matter where you live, and you can watch this game from your living room, and we can say that that's a good idea for fans to do. Now, there was a problem with that, is that iFollow didn't work. And there was the other problem with that, is that Reading scored their goal while iFollow didn't work. So I don't know about everyone else, but I couldn't watch that goal having paid a tenner to watch this game. Reading were then 1-0 up. You get in about 15 minutes in, it started working, and you go in, okay, cool, let's watch the end of the game. Reading 1-0 up, 92nd minute, equaliser. And that's football's return after all those months. A slap in the face, let's say. Comedy moment is a kind way of putting it. So that's what my nomination is going to be. Adam, what are you going to say for this one?
It's a bit of a personal one, but I think Mr. Dye taking my advice in trying to move Mark Bowen to director of football, I thought, for me, I was going to put it in my Swansea preview at the end of the season. I thought I'd just slip it in there, wouldn't cause too much reaction, just put it in there, see what it's like. And then we decided to do it as a separate article. And I thought I was being bold at the time, perhaps a little bit stupid, even at the end of the season. And then Mr. Dye goes ahead and tries to do a similar thing 2 weeks on. But obviously, Mr. Dye doesn't read the Tilehurst End as much as we want him to. But I think a notable mention for me was the 5-0 win against Luton Town. After such a terrible performance against Brentford, I was just sat there laughing at my computer about us being, 3-0 up at half-time against Luton. I was just that was just such a confusing game for me. And another notable mention was Mayaska's slap on Tom Lawrence. I think that was just absolutely ludicrous. It just kind of happened out of the blue, really. At the end of the game, you saw two of them just completely fighting, and then, to cap it all off, Mayaska goes and slaps him. I didn't really understand that. But for me, the main one really is Mr. Dye moving Mark Bowen to director of football about 2 weeks before the start of the season, and then Paunovic having to quarantine in his first game on the touchline being the first league game of the season, and he even missed the first competitive match against Colchester. So yeah, it was just an absolutely ludicrous situation, and the manager, that managerial situation for me as a whole, has to be my nomination.
Yeah, we've had a couple of mentions on Twitter for sacking Bowen 2 weeks before the start of the season. We've also had Mate nutmegging two players out on the right wing. Once as a comedy moment, also the Blackburn's defending for Yaku Mate's goal against them has been mentioned. Sim, what are you going to say for this one then?
Mine goes back to quite early on in the year when, if you can remember, Reading's fan base absolutely rocketed in late January when we signed Ayub Timbe from Beijing Renhe on loan. And for anyone who kind of follows the goings on social media, it's a bit hard to explain if you don't. But we had an absolute flood of Kenyan fans on the Reading Facebook page saying how delighted they were that Ayub Timbe, their favourite player, started to play for Reading, and they all started to come up with some very funny excuses for why they were suddenly Reading fans. There was one guy who said, "Where can I get a Reading jersey, please? I've been supporting this club since 1987." This Kenyan fan who has presumably not followed Reading at all before then until Ayub Timbe turns up. And another person says 150% of Kenyans are Reading fans since 1898. Even when Stephen Hunt injured Petr Cech, we were still around. And it was just a lovely moment when it was lovely and funny just how kind of Reading reached this global stardom just from signing Ayub Timbe. And it probably only got even more funny considering just how little he played. I think he had a couple of games, maybe came off the bench a few times, but there was such a global appeal for this one person coming over, and it really it felt like a moment to revel in, basically, and it was very funny.
Yeah, massive love to the Kenyans. Massive shout out to any Kenyans who still listen to this podcast. We might have had a couple who drifted in as Ayub Timbe came in, a player who at the end of the day did nothing for the team, let's face it. But if anyone's still sticking around from that part of the world, big love to you. And Ollie, what are you going to say then for the comedy moment?
I might have been won over by Sim's argument for the Timbit comments, but I was going to nominate the whole managerial saga as Adam's mentioned. Probably not particularly funny for fans. I was quite angry about it, but probably looking in from the outside, it was almost the epitome of a banter club in quotation marks. I'm probably sure there's a lot of fans from around the Championship and from around England laughing at Reading's situation, because it was almost so farcical, the fact that we were changing managers 2 weeks before the start of the season, and that the new manager wouldn't actually be in charge for the EFL Cup game because he was in quarantine, which is very, very, very 2020. So, yeah, I'd be happy with either of those, either the managerial saga or the whole Ayub Timbe Masika furore.
Yeah, I'm trying to think with the managerial saga, I'm trying to think of when I found it most funny. And it's difficult because it was just annoying more than anything. I think the funny thing for me was that there was probably a period on Twitter where about 4 different Serbians were linked with the role, and any Serbian manager who had been, who has a Wikipedia page was being thrown out as a potential manager that Reading were about to sign, which was funny but also farcical. I think I'm going to go with the Kenyan fans' reaction to Ayub Timbe signing, not as a laughing at them at all, but almost the comedy of the jokes that were being made by them, and the fact they'd just come out of the woodwork and the support they were showing for the player and the team, and obviously the fact that you don't really hear from them so much anymore was really nice. And it's one of the, it's such a a rare moment that you get the kind of globalization of football coming to Reading and being a positive in that sense. And the Kenyan fans' brief sojourn into Reading football territory is the comedy moment of 2020. We'll have you back anytime, perhaps not Ayub Timbe though. And that brings us on. Last couple of awards then, let's rattle through these and we'll have a chat about 2021, the Pavel Pogrebniak Most Missed Reading Player Award. Adam Federici, Aaron Tishbola, Danny Williams, Jordan Abita and Lewis Baker have all picked these up in previous years. Sim, who are you going to nominate for this one?
John Swift, who obviously played a lot in the earlier part of the season, but given his injury problems this season, we've massively missed that creative spark deeper on in the midfield. Obviously, other players have kind of stepped up in his absence. Laurent Renamoto have been very good in that kind of position that he would usually play in. Elise has obviously done very well creatively, but I just think that we badly missed someone of his quality and of his consistency to create from dead balls or from open play. There's no one else really in the squad with his kind of skill set of being able to kind of dictate play and have that range of passing, and is going to be a big boost when he comes back. I think he's due to return for the Boxing Day game, which will be our next match. And when we do get him back in the side, hopefully keep him in the side and he doesn't have these injury problems again. That's going to be a quality new first team signing going into the second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be minded to go along with that, but obviously I feel like the team has done quite well in his absence, or despite his absence. And one player, I know Ollie and Adam are probably going to agree with me on this, who we haven't done well in the absence of, is kind of why I nominated him for the best player, is Lucas João, because certainly last season we saw in that absolute briefest of flash in that Stoke game when he scored the opening goal and then had to come off the different team that Reading were. And Adam, are you going to say again that Lucas João is the most missed player?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, both under Mark Bowen and under Veljko Paunovic, we've missed him so much. The team didn't really function as well without him. And even though George Puskás did very well, actually, against Watford at home, the fact that both of them are out now just shows how much we miss Lucas João. He's just that complete striker for me. We've been missing it for years and years and years. And I didn't know if he was going to be that complete striker when he first came here. But he's just showed that, and how long have we been saying it? We've been saying it, as I've been saying for years, that we've been missing that complete striker, and I think we've finally found him now. And with the amount of goals that he brings, and not only the amount of goals that he scores as well, but the way he brings other players into the game, he's just absolutely vital for a lot of systems, not just one, but a lot of them. And therefore, for me, I have to go with Lucas João 100%.
Ollie, to seal it?
Yeah, no disagreements. We've not really missed any of the players we let go in the summer. So yeah, I just have to go with Lucas João. It just makes you think, where we might have been if he had been fit for the whole of 2020. I'm not saying we would have got into the top six last season. We might have finished with a bit more of a flourish last season, and not clearly the last few games where we've missed him as well. I'd imagine we might have picked up a few more points. So yeah, definitely Lucas João for me.
Yeah, and as we sit here now, the last couple of games that we've got in 2020 might just further emphasise the how much we miss Lucas João, and hopefully we will get John Swift back. But Lucas João, the Pavel Pogrebniak Award for the most missed Reading player or victor this year. So the last one then, the breakout prediction, which I think we've had some hits and misses over the last few years of this one. Royston Drenthe won in 2013, Dominic Samuel in 2014, Jonathan Bond in 2015. Okay, not so great. Yaku Meite, however, 2016 winner, good shout. Omar Richards, another good shout. Danny Loader in 2018, and last year's winner was Michael Elise, which was a good shout again. So I think this is a tough one this year, though, because Veljko Paunovic, we've had a lot of young players on the bench, but we've not really played them. I'd have to say, we've obviously got Sam Baldock as the only striker effectively at this moment in time, but Nahu Melvin Lambert's been on the bench and he's not actually played a league game yet. Sam Baldock's not actually he didn't even get the start against Norwich. So, it's an interesting one to pick out a young player from this. Ollie, do you want to have a first shout?
Yeah, it's a hard one. Yeah, it's a really hard one because so we had it in the summer. Sort of that massive cull of academy players that effectively wiped out the whole under 23s team. So you're almost looking at this season potentially is that usually we have at least sort of one sort of breakout star a season. And you're probably looking at maybe that not really happening this year. Obviously, Tom Holmes has broken into the first team, but I'm not really sure you can, give him as a prediction based on the fact that he's been out on loan in Belgium and had played like a game about 2 years ago or something. But yeah, out of the ones that are sort of available and the ones that have been on the bench, I'd probably go with Jayden Onan. Just because he seems to not that I've seen much of him, not that I've seen much of any of them, but sort of in terms of the fact that he plays a position that Reading might need backup in. He's an attacking midfielder. I've gone with him over someone like Dejan Tetek just because Tetek's more of a holding midfielder. It seems as if Andy Rinomhota and Josh Lawrence sort of have that position nailed down, and sort of Alpha Semedo can play there if needed. So I think we might see more of Jayden Onan. I've gone with him.
Yeah, well, I think I'm probably going to go with Dejan Tetek because of the sense that Rinomhota and Laurent cannot play every single game like they have been so far. Something's got to give, and I think they definitely need a rest. So Tetek, I'd like to have seen him off the bench more. He's only come off the bench once so far, I think, this season. I think that we've been in games that have owed themselves to him coming on more, which has been, I think that's probably one of the things I'd say from Paunovic so far is that, at some point you've got to give these guys a chance. And if it's, the Brentford game is a prime example of why you wouldn't throw on someone like Melvin Lambert. Obviously, we threw on Onan against Norwich, but it's not enough really, is it? Sim, what are you going to say for prediction?
Dejan Tetek as well for me. I've not really seen too much of him. I only saw him in, I think it was maybe the Luton game in the League Cup when I think he started in a kind of like a midfield two in a 4-2-3-1, and he seemed like one of the few players with the drive and the energy and the positivity to try and make things happen. Obviously, it's only a small sample size, but you could tell that he's got that bit of bravery and he's got that bit of belief in him. And it's annoying we've not seen more of him this season. I've got a feeling that he may be injured. I don't think that's confirmed anywhere, but he's not been involved recently for the first team when you would have thought he'd be on the bench ahead of someone like Tenno Watson or Ryan East, who have been involved. But I would think that at some point in 2021, he's going to come back. He's going to get an opportunity, whether that's in the Cup or in the league. As you said, Rinomhota and Laurent are going to need a break at some point. And Tetek seems to be the kind of player who would fit into that system. He seems to have the energy and the tenacity that is kind of reminiscent of Rinomhota. Again, I've not seen too much of him, so that might be an inaccurate kind of portrayal of what he's like as a player. But I could see him being someone that really fits into what Paunovic wants from his team. And obviously there's the Serbian link as well, which is perhaps a little bit tenuous. But given that there is that link, which may bring a little bit more out of him, possibly. I think he's been involved with the Serbian youth setup as well. You can tell that he's got a good future ahead of him, and I think he's going to be the most likely to break through. Honourable mention for someone like Nahum, Melvin Lambert, who I would have liked to see more of. I would have liked to see him come on against Brentford and get a run out at the end, even if it's just like 10 minutes at the end of the match as an extra striker. But Tetek takes it for me.
Yeah, so he's been, I think, most recently involved with Serbia under-19s, but also played for England under-18s, Tetek. So looks like, I think it's tough, isn't it? It's as good a shot as any. Adam, are you going to throw another name into the mix?
I'm going to go with Ethan Bristow, and I think this is purely because of our squad depth at left back. And even though Estevez started at left back against Brentford, I think that Bristow may get a go at some point if we have another injury crisis. And I think that, we've had a couple of left backs come through the academy in recent years, obviously Abita, Richards, and now maybe it's time for Bristow to come through and show what he can do. And I think he made an appearance and was half decent. I think it was either against Gillingham in the pre-season friendly or I think it was Colchester actually in the Carabao Cup. He put in quite a decent performance, and I think he's just ahead in the pecking order right now, ahead of Imari Samuels. So yeah, I think for me, Bristow is probably my nomination, just to give you someone different. Notable mentions, as you've been saying, for Tetek and Onen, because I think it was Rinomota and Laurent have started pretty much every game this season, and at some point, we may have 2 injuries in midfield, and Tetek may have to come in. And, it's been good seeing him on the bench this season as well. So, that's quite good. Onen, I think, was quite highly rated actually at Brentford. I think they have a B team as opposed to an academy. So yeah, Onen's done quite well as well. Saw a post on LinkedIn that's quite highly rated. That he's quite highly rated. So yeah, fair enough to him. But to give you something different, I'm going to go with Ethan Bristow. But congrats to Tetek if he's got that nomination.
Absolutely. That is the breakout prediction of 2020 for Reading FC on the Tilehurst End Podcast, Dejan Tetek. And certainly going through the last few years, we have called a few good names. So let's hope that Dejan can add himself to the list. And that draws to an end the Tilehurst End Podcast Awards for 2020. A whole host of good and bad moments, good and bad players to pick from for that one. And certainly, let's face it, a memorable year for all concerned. But there was 2021 to be had and all to play for in the game of football. So let's talk about that in the final part of the show.
You're listening to the Tilehurst End Podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
I will just cover you off for the Prediction League before we move on, because we have had quite a lot of movement in the last couple of days. Handbags has picked, he's back on his 3-1 bandwagon with a 3-1 for Norwich and 3-1 for Brentford in last week. So he's jumped back on to the top. He is on 15 points, level with myself. I had 1-0 to Brentford, so I've got 15 points as well. Not too far behind is Westy. He picked up a couple of defeats for Reading, both 2-0, so he gets 2 points for those. He's on 14 points. Sim got Norwich bang on, so Sim, you're on 10 points now. Olly, you also got Norwich bang on, so you are on 9. And now we will we'll skip over having any predictions for the last few games of the year. Got Luton on Boxing Day, I think it is next, and then who is it to finish off? It is Swansea, of course, at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, December the 30th. So that's on Sky Sports, I think that one is. And then we go into the 2021, and it starts actually with a bit of an interesting fixture list for Reading. On the 2nd, we have Huddersfield away. Bit of a kind of, don't know too much what to expect out of them. They can produce a good performance on their day. Then Luton in the FA Cup, of course. Brentford come to the Madstad on the 16th. Then Coventry and Preston before Bournemouth round off the start of the year. So really, it's a good enough fixture list, I think, for Reading to be able to claim a couple of wins out of that. Let's go through then just a quick fire questions to go through for 2021. And Olly, I'll start with you then. What does Paunovic need to keep doing as he goes into 2021 that he started so far?
Keeping spirits high, I think. It's tough at the moment with the results not quite going our way. But as I said earlier, that was a massive part of our early season form, was sort of creating that confidence and creating that team spirit within the group. And I think he does seem that the kind of manager that is very good at that. He can calm his players down. He's very realistic in what he says in interviews. But he needs to not let heads drop, because it has been a tough couple of games for Reading, losing against Norwich and Brentford. But and it's been sort of our Achilles heel really over the last couple of years, is that when that morale goes down, it's very, very hard to rediscover. In both individual games and the fact that when we concede, we sort of struggle to get back into matches, but also overall, we've got ourselves into a couple of ruts in recent years. So if we can keep spirits high, keep confidence levels high, and keep players happy, then I hope we can sort of stick in and around that top 6.
And Adam, if there's one thing that Paunovic needs to change, what do you think that is?
I was going to be harsh and say the fitness team, but we've had this problem now with injuries for years and years and years. I thought our luck with injuries changed actually towards the end of last season, but no, it's just not changed at all. And for me, this is costly now. The amount of injuries that we have, whether the fitness team could do a lot about this or not, I don't know. But we need to make sure that we're keeping players as fit as possible, because over the past couple of games, we're thinking that we're going to lose because of the amount of injuries that we have. But yeah, it's just been. It has been a struggle for us over the past couple of games. I know Paunovic doesn't have the real power to do this, but maybe change the championship referees as well and the officials. But obviously he doesn't have the power to do that. But yeah, just focusing on the injuries, making sure you're tweaking the training towards players and making sure keeping as many players fit as possible heading into 2021, because if we can keep as many players as fit as possible, then God knows where we could end up.
And Sim, I'll throw the question over to you of what if we could make one signing in the transfer window. I know Jack Hillick has tweeted us saying, what do we need to do for January, and do you expect a lot of activity? And thanks to Jack and Lloyd Wall for sending in their award tips as well. But for the transfer window, I think if we could just make one signing, who do you think, or where do you think that would be?
I'd basically want cover for Yaku Meite, which I think is probably the biggest gap in our squad. Obviously, there's problems around Lucas Shaw being fit or not being fit and having to kind of adapt to him. But what we really lack when Meite isn't in the team is a quick, direct, wide forward who can make runs in behind. And that's obviously a big benefit when you're playing with Zhao in the team or even with Puskas in the team. But it gives you so much of an extra dimension, even if you're playing without a striker. We've played or tried to play a false nine in the last couple of games, and that system can work if you have players making runs in behind beyond that striker and really kind of stretching teams and doing that. But we haven't had that because Yaku Meite hasn't been in the side. So if there's one player I can bring in, it would be that kind of wide, direct forward with pace and basically the speed to put us on the front foot a lot more, good on the counter and good at exploiting those spaces that people like Ajari and Elise can open up, and they can play someone in with a clever pass, but it needs to be someone on the end of it, and we can make do without Zhao to an extent, but what we really can't do without is that kind of quick striker.
Yeah, that's. I think in terms of the transfer window, I think it really depends as to what the owners believe, whether they believe they can go ham and properly push for this being all or nothing. I think the last few weeks maybe showed that's not a great idea, so we might be relying on loans, and it really depends on how many clubs are happy to sell players and whether they can sell them on the cheap at this time of year, because not many players really went on the cheap in the summer despite the pandemic, and maybe that's going to be continuing in January. So we will wait and see. Obviously, the Tilehurst End is your best place to keep an eye on the Facebook and Twitter and the website for all the goings on. And really that leads me to the final question of the Christmas special, and it is that $1 million question. If you guys can keep it to one sentence, because I know we could talk about this for an entire podcast on its own. Where will Reading be in 12 months' time? And this is something that I'll say first. There's a doom and gloom prediction, obviously, in that the playoff hunt falls away and Paunovic is sacked in October and we're kind of back to square one. I think my genuine prediction is that Reading won't go up this year, but we will probably lose Michael Elise in the summer. The rest of the team will be held together, and that will mean that in 12 months' time, we're back in probably about the same position with a slightly better team, perhaps a bit more stability, a lot more experience, and therefore Reading can have another crack at the playoffs. But I think this season will probably be beyond us. Sim, I'm going to throw to you first then for 12 months' time where Reading will be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be kind of similar to the Brian McDermott first years, where we essentially did well one campaign, but then had to sell a key player, and then after that had to rebuild. But again, there's stability there, and there's the ability to kind of reinvest and rebuild and bring young players through. And it's going to be not kind of rapid improvement and immediately getting into the Premier League, but we are on the right direction.
Adam, then what are you going to say for 12 months' time?
I'm worried about FFP, I have to be honest with you. I know that we've lost, I think it's 50 million over the past 2 years, and I'm not sure how they've changed the rules this year, but we're looking at making another loss again in 2019-20, especially with the players that we've signed and the Puskás signing Zhao. So that's a real worry for me. I hope and pray that we keep Paunovic to build something for the long term. I think that's something that we've needed for years now. But yeah, I think we might be towards the bottom of the championship, maybe for FFP reasons and deductions. But hopefully, the rules will change, and or if they have already been changed, in our favour. Because right now our finances, even though I think the tide is turning, they don't look great.
And Ollie, are you going to be the person that says in 12 months' time we're going to be in the Premier League?
Oh, yeah.
You want to.
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, I feel like I should be the optimistic one here and say we'll be top of the Premier League and go and do a Leicester or whatever next year. But no, I'm on sort of similar sort of lines as you and Sim. I think we might get into the top 6 this year, but obviously given our terrible record in the playoffs, we are definitely not going to win the playoffs. But yeah, no, I think, and again, who knows whether Veljko Paunovic will be in charge based off the owners' record of hiring and firing managers. So yeah, I'd like to think we've been in sort of a similar sort of position, sort of having a fairly decent crack at promotion this year, and hopefully building towards much of the same next season.
Yeah, to be fair, I would describe that as a pretty optimistic position to be in, and the 3 of us have it is a good sign that Reading are going in the right direction. So that is, that's the takeaway of 2020 is that Reading have finished the year better than we started it, and we have good reason to believe that we'll at least maintain this position, if not grow it out into a full-on promotion tilt. And it could happen between now and June, or now and May. It's really on the cards. It's just about how the team can grow and keep developing and keep maybe adding to it in January, which is going to be an interesting one to watch. So all that leaves us to do is to thank everyone who's made it to the end of the podcast. It's always a long one for the awards ceremony. Big thank you to everyone who's done it, and big thank you to Sim, Adam and Ollie, who have all helped me out for this Sunday afternoon and had a nice little chat about Reading Football Club.
Just having me.
No worries.
And we will be back. We usually do take a break at about this time of year. We'll be back probably after the Huddersfield game. So the first weekend of January, we will aim to have a show for you. And we will, in fact, also be dropping in on Christmas Eve a certain wintry themed interview with a former Reading player, shall we say. No hints more than that. But we'll have a special show for you on the 24th, which we look forward to releasing with you. Myself and Marco Barda from the website interviewed a former Reading player, which was a whole lot of fun. And certainly that interview, I'm really looking forward to that being put out. So really all that's left to do, as I said at the top of the show, it's so important. It's so massively thankful we are and grateful that people keep tuning into this podcast. It's been a ridiculous year in so many senses, and perhaps the most ridiculous thing of all is that Reading FC are actually looking like a good football team once again as we go into the 2021. And on that note, I will bid you farewell. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all, and we'll see you on the other side. As always, go on your arse.
Street. It's funny how the